Harry and Meghan's obsession with the Prince and Princess of Wales is really beginning to bubble over. I honestly think those two need to see different therapists, because this is coming the stuff of like a thriller, like a horror book, like a horror film, single white female, but they're both doing it. Meghan with her obsession with Catherine, and Harry with William.
The Owen family's decision to not meet Harry and Meghan during the Australian tour wasn't some random brush-off. It was calculated, intentional, and loaded with meaning. People involved had clear reasons, and this wasn't about being too busy or uninterested.
New Zealanders and Australians are completely disgusted by the way that they treated their own family. New Zealanders and Australians are very family-orientated people. And even though some of these woke-topians like Jacinda Ardern were politically aligned to Harry and Meghan, they actually want nothing to do with the Sussexes either. They have all chosen.
Robert Irwin, who has a known professional connection with Prince William through the Earthshot Prize, isn't the type to skip a high-profile meeting just because he doesn't care about fame. He knew exactly what that meeting would signal, how it would look, what it would imply, and how it could affect his alignment with William's circle. This wasn't just a handshake opportunity, it was a move on a much bigger chessboard. And in the end, he made a clear call. The downside was bigger than any upside. Now here's where it gets even more interesting.
Fiercely loyal to the firm, didn't want to upset Prince William. And Tash posted on this, Meghan and Harry wanted to meet with the Irwin family whilst they were out in Australia, but they declined the Montecito grifters' offer. Those two really are stalkers of the Prince and Princess of Wales.
The comparison people keep making between Robert Irwin and Prince Harry isn't random. It actually hits hard because of how similar their starting points were. Both experienced a shocking, highly public family loss. Both grew up under intense public attention because of who their parents were, and both had a natural pathway into charity and humanitarian work. But what they did next, that's where everything splits wide open. Robert Irwin stayed focused. He carried forward his father's conservation mission and built something that feels real and personal. He created his own identity, whether it's working confidently with animals or even stepping into entertainment like Dancing with the Stars and proving he can hold his own.
Meghan very frustrated by MasterChef, apparently, because she was called royalty on camera. But Tash does not believe this. She's saying, I call bullshit. Meghan was apparently unhappy being called royalty. She's just trying to pass blame as she's had so much pushback over merching her titles.
His public image feels genuine, warm, grounded, and clearly his, not something copied or recycled. Yes, he speaks about mental health, but he doesn't turn it into a stage for himself. He doesn't center every moment around his own struggles. He keeps moving, keeps working, and keeps things balanced. When people throw shade his way, he shrugs it off and keeps going. No big speeches, no dramatic responses. Harry's path, though, tells a very different story. Over time, his personal struggles have become front and center, not just privately, but as part of a very public narrative. His connection to legacy? It now often shows up framed through frustration rather than continuation. Even his mental health advocacy often circles back to his own experiences in a very direct, very personal way.
Meghan very frustrated by MasterChef, apparently, because she was called royalty on camera. But Tash does not believe this. She's saying, I call bullshit. Meghan was apparently unhappy being called royalty. She's just trying to pass blame as she's had so much pushback over merching her titles.
And when that message gets delivered at paid speaking events, reportedly reaching tens of thousands per appearance, it changes how people see it. It doesn't feel subtle anymore. It feels like a performance with a price tag attached. This contrast isn't hidden, it's obvious. You don't need to pick sides to see it. You just need to look at what each person built from similar beginnings and how differently those choices played out. Then comes the MasterChef situation, and suddenly things get even more revealing. Reports claim that Meghan Markle wasn't happy about being labeled as royalty on the show and preferred to be introduced simply as Meghan Markle. But that claim didn't land smoothly. People immediately questioned it. Why? Because in many other situations, there's been a clear expectation to maintain that royal-style recognition. Observers quickly pointed out the contradiction, saying, this doesn't match the pattern. Across events and branding, titles and formal presentation have often been emphasized, not avoided. So the real issue didn't seem to be about being called royalty at all.
that Harry is constantly trying to cosplay William and Catherine. And I think we saw that at lots of other moments in the tour, Tash, as well. Like, they copied that phone stunt, they copied the whole boat trip. There seems to be lots of moments where this is happening.
As some noticed, it likely came down to how the name was used. When the host enthusiastically introduced the Duchess of Sussex, that spotlight hit differently than just hearing Meghan Markle. And that distinction, it matters more than it might seem at first glance. Because here's the key detail. Nobody says Meghan Sussex, and there's a reason for that. The Sussex title is Duchess of Sussex, not Sussex as a last name. And that mix-up matters more than it seems. On MasterChef, the host used the wrong wording, and suddenly it turned into something bigger. Meghan's team tried to frame it like a stance, like she doesn't want royal-style labels at all. But here's the problem. That idea doesn't line up with how things usually play out in public. That's why people didn't fully buy it. The confusion itself, totally normal. But turning it into a bold policy statement, that's where eyebrows started going up. When actions in other situations point the opposite way, it creates a gap, and people notice that fast. Now shift the focus to something even more telling, the media angle. When the spectator steps in, it's not just noise. This isn't some random gossip outlet. It's a serious publication with a very specific audience that follows politics and institutions closely.
Said that, in an interview, that my mum is done with William now. He's got, Catherine and the kids, and now she's my mum. And you really do get that sense of him. That's why he's always talking about her and, using the Diana card. It's a thing that he does now.
So when it runs a piece titled, "We Can Still Save Prince Harry," and even ends with a line about welcoming him back with a drink, it's sending a clear message. That's not casual writing. It reflects a viewpoint coming from deeper, more traditional circles. And that viewpoint sounds familiar. It closely mirrors what Boris Johnson has hinted at before. Whether it's coordinated or just a shared mindset, the message is loud. Harry needs to step away, admit mistakes, and rebuild his image from scratch. The narrative they push is simple, but dramatic. It suggests he should come back, fix things publicly, and reset his path. That idea leans heavily on the classic prodigal son story, a powerful image that's easy to understand and hard to ignore. But here's the twist. In the original story, the return only works because of real change, real humility, real transformation. The acceptance comes after everything is proven, not before. In this version, though, the welcome is being offered up front, almost like a reward waiting at the finish line. And that changes everything. Because outside of opinion pieces, there's something harder to spin: public opinion.
I really thought that post was so important and so honest, actually, because it is only when you compare and contrast the way that this Australian royal family, because they really are, have dealt with the trauma in such a different way.
Polling numbers have shown a clear trend, with a strong majority expressing disapproval. That's not a small detail, it's a reality check. No matter how polished the narrative becomes, numbers like that don't just disappear. Media stories can suggest a comeback, but they can't rewrite how people already feel. The gap between narrative and reality, it's still there, and it's noticeable. Then comes another layer, the criticism of this whole rescue framing. Many people are calling it out directly, saying the story paints Harry as if he's just being pulled along, not making his own decisions. And that idea doesn't sit right, because when you look at the timeline, the choices are clear. Harry chose his path, every major step, every public moment, every big decision. From interviews to books to major appearances, these were not random events. They were deliberate moves. Framing it like he had no control? That's where the argument starts to fall apart. This is why the conversation keeps evolving. It's not just about headlines anymore, it's about accountability, perception, and how stories are shaped in real time.
Jordan, a place that Catherine once called home, and they stayed in the same hotel suite as Catherine and William. Harry and Meghan's obsession with the Prince and Princess of Wales is really beginning to bubble over. I honestly think those two need to see different therapists, because this is coming the stuff of like a thriller, like a horror book, like a horror film.
Prince Harry isn't just standing on the sidelines of everything that's happened. Far from it. Some of the most controversial moments tied to the Sussex storyline connect directly to his own actions, not just the broader narrative people try to build around him. Take the legal disputes, the tensions with former associates, and the accounts shared by groups like the so-called Sussex Survivors Club. These aren't vague claims floating around. They point to specific behavior, and importantly, they don't place him as some silent observer. He's right in the middle of it. That's why the idea that he's simply being led or influenced doesn't fully hold up. The picture that emerges is much more active. Decisions made, actions taken, and patterns that reflect personal responsibility. There are serious accusations described in legal filings and public discussions, including conflicts with individuals connected to his own charitable efforts. These situations are framed around direct involvement, not distance. Add to that reported moments of aggressive behavior and workplace tension, and it paints a much more complicated image than the simplified version often repeated. So when some narratives try to present him as someone who could easily step away and reset everything, it skips over a big part of the story, because the record isn't empty, it's detailed, and it's still growing. Now shift to the royal side, where another major signal came through loud and clear. King Charles III delivered a rare and powerful national address, only his third outside the usual holiday messages.
About was when Poe, one of the hosts, excitedly screamed, "The Duchess of Sussex!" She called her Meghan Markle.
Yes.
And all I could think of watching that was, I'm Sussex now.
Yeah,
You know,
that
maybe
was the
she's
annoyance.
upset about that.
100%, that was the annoyance. They didn't call her Meghan Sussex because no one calls you Meghan Sussex because you're not Meghan Sussex.
And the setting made it even more meaningful. From Balmoral Castle, a place deeply tied to royal history, he renewed a solemn promise connected to his role. The message was steady, direct, and impossible to misread. He's staying exactly where he is. He didn't list every issue or headline, but the tone said everything. He acknowledged challenging times and reinforced commitment, ending with a deeply personal tribute that didn't go unnoticed. But there was something else people picked up on, and it stood out. Viewers noticed visible strain. The delivery wasn't smooth all the way through, and careful editing filled in pauses with archival imagery. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. This wasn't the image of someone handling things effortlessly. It showed effort, pressure, and the weight of responsibility. And strangely, that made the message even stronger, because when a promise is repeated under visible strain, it carries more weight, not less. Then comes the statue situation, and it sparked a completely different kind of reaction. The newly revealed memorial quickly became a talking point, with many observers saying it didn't quite capture the figure it was meant to honor. Some even compared it to something straight out of an old-school film look, definitely not the reaction expected. Meanwhile, another design, featuring a horseback version, had already gained public support earlier on.
That spectator column, it's like they are following a script. They must think we're stupid.
It's also very, and it's not often I say this because it's something that Meghan throws around, but it's misogynistic. I'm sorry, like they both, Boris and him, were both talking about, rescuing him. Harry needs rescuing once they get him away from the claws and the clutches of his wife.
People were clear about it. That version felt right. But the final result? It landed very differently, and reactions were blunt. Comments like, "It doesn't look right," and "This doesn't match her image," started circulating fast. And these weren't random opinions. They came from people who knew that image well and expected something more accurate. That moment turned into more than just an art critique. It reflected a deeper issue. When public expectation and final decisions don't match, it raises bigger questions about direction and judgment. All of this is happening at the same time. Poll numbers, media narratives, declined meetings, public speeches, and high-profile appearances. They're all stacking up into one long, continuous record. And here's the thing. None of it resets or disappears. Every event, every decision, every headline adds another layer. From polling data to financial reports, from interviews to public appearances, it all builds into a timeline that keeps expanding. This period stands out because everything is so tightly packed together. It's not one isolated moment, it's a chain of events that shows exactly where things stand right now, both for the Sussex narrative and the monarchy itself. And that record? It doesn't rewrite itself, it just keeps growing, piece by piece. The summer will only add more layers to this story, and that long-term record, it doesn't rush, it just keeps building, detail by detail. Every move, every appearance, every headline gets stacked into something bigger over time. Now look at one of the more talked about patterns. Meghan Markle appearing on MasterChef didn't just land randomly, it came with context that people quickly picked up on.
It was Harry dealing with Sophie Chanduka and all the terrible things that went on with there, allegedly. Meghan wasn't part of that. Harry is a bad egg.
Not long before that, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had openly shared how much she enjoys the show, even casually mentioning to a local vendor that she's a huge fan. That timing, it caught attention fast. And it's not just one moment. People started lining up multiple examples. Trips that followed similar paths, including a visit to Jordan where the same luxury hotel choice raised eyebrows. Then there are the charity appearances, visits to hospitals, support centers, and community programs that closely mirror the kind of schedule typically seen on official royal tours. Individually, each moment could be brushed off as coincidence. But when they start repeating across different places and situations, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. It doesn't require deep analysis, just observation of how often these overlaps appear. Now shift to a different angle, the media conversation itself. Allison Hammond has stepped into the discussion, and her role adds a whole new layer. She's widely known for building her career from the ground up, through personality, humor, and consistency, not through controversy or institutional backing. Because of that, her public support for Meghan, especially when framed around shared identity, sparked mixed reactions. Here's where it gets interesting. Critics pointed out that Hammond's own journey actually challenges the argument she's defending. Throughout her career, she hasn't leaned on narratives of being held back. She's focused on the work, built a connection with audiences, and steadily grown into one of the most recognized TV personalities in the UK. Her success didn't come from headlines, it came from performance and public trust. That contrast is what people keep coming back to. If the main explanation for criticism were based on identity alone, then similar public figures would likely face similar reactions. But Hammond's experience has been the opposite: steady support, growing popularity, and strong audience approval.
We now live in, I suspect, may have troubled her deeply. But I take heart from her belief that goodness will always prevail and that a brighter dawn is never far from the horizon. In this, I renew my own solemn pledge of duty and service to you all. God bless you, darling Mama. You remain forever.
Meanwhile, Meghan's media coverage has followed a very different path. That's why some observers argue the difference comes down to actions and perception, not shared background. One public figure is seen as consistent and relatable, while the other is often tied to more divisive headlines and controversial moments. Polling numbers reflect that gap clearly. Catherine, Princess of Wales, continues to hold strong approval ratings, while Hammond remains one of the most liked presenters on British television. Meghan's numbers, on the other hand, show a much more divided response. And that creates a real challenge for a single explanation. When you place all three side by side, same public space, different reactions, it pushes the conversation beyond simple answers. The comparison forces people to look deeper at behavior, choices, and how each individual connects with the public over time. Because in the end, that long-term record doesn't filter itself. It just keeps growing, adding more examples, more contrasts, and more moments that shape how everything is seen. The comparison with Allison Hammond only works because the difference is clear, and it doesn't point to identity, it points to behavior. If that comparison didn't hold up, the argument would fall apart instantly. But it doesn't. That's what makes it so hard to ignore. Now add in everything else people have been noticing. The repeated parallels with Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, from travel choices to public appearances, aren't being seen as random anymore. Then there's the Irwin situation, where Robert Irwin made a quiet but very clear decision that spoke volumes without saying a word. All of this feeds into a bigger picture, one shaped by public opinion numbers that are impossible to ignore. Polling from YouGov shows a huge gap. William sitting high with strong approval, while Prince Harry is far lower. That's not a small difference, it's a signal. These aren't the numbers of two people competing on equal ground. They show one side moving forward with stability, while the other is trying to rebuild from the outside. And the strategy? It looks like an attempt to recreate in a different space the same kind of public connection that once came naturally. Here's where things get even sharper. There is a visible sequence of moves, travel, appearances, major moments across places like Jordan, public speeches, and international stops. The pattern exists, no question, but the big claim, that this sequence is successfully restoring public support, that's where it runs into trouble, because the numbers don't back it up. Polling data, independent surveys, and even broader public reactions all point to the same thing. Attention is increasing, but approval isn't rising with it. Media coverage? Yes, plenty of it. But public opinion? That's holding steady, and not in a positive direction. That gap is everything. The strategy seems built on the idea that if enough major outlets repeat the right narrative, public perception will eventually follow. But reality isn't playing along. The audience isn't just reading headlines. They're watching actions, tracking patterns, and forming their own conclusions. So you end up with two things happening at the same time. On one side, certain media voices, like The Spectator, are pushing a comeback storyline, echoing ideas linked to figures like Boris Johnson. On the other side, the public is holding its ground, showing little sign of shifting. That split explains everything. The rescue narrative exists, but so does the 30% approval rating. Both are real, and they don't cancel each other out. One is a story being told, the other is a reaction being measured.
The statue, this official statue, you actually said it's ugly. It looks nothing like her. What shitty tribute and a waste of money. We should have had the one everyone loved. And the one that was the one everyone loved. We loved it. Yeah. And now, Tash, they have come out with a memorial which doesn't feature her on horseback.
Meanwhile, key figures are simply observing. William is steady. Catherine is steady. Robert Irwin has already made his position clear through action, not words. And the broader public, it's already made its call, and it's not easily swayed. And then there's the royal side again, where a moment that should have been simple carried unexpected weight. King Charles III appeared in a centenary video meant to mark an important occasion. But what stood out wasn't just the message, it was how it was delivered. Careful viewers noticed something unusual. The recording didn't flow smoothly, and subtle editing filled the gaps with archival visuals. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable enough to raise quiet concern. This wasn't about presentation. It reflected effort, real effort. And that made the renewed pledge even more powerful, because delivering that message under visible strain sends a stronger signal than a flawless performance ever could. One thing is clear, the numbers won't shift because of headlines or opinion pieces. They will only move if actions change in a way people actually respond to. And right now, that shift hasn't happened. The record keeps growing, the reactions stay steady, and the gap between narrative and reality remains wide open. What people saw in that recording wasn't just a formal message, it was something much more real. The visible strain, the pauses, the careful edits, all of it told a story alongside the words themselves. King Charles III renewed his pledge, yes, but it was clear that doing so came at a personal cost. This wasn't a polished, effortless appearance. Reports point to serious health challenges, yet he continues to carry out demanding responsibilities, from preparing for major international visits to handling internal family pressures and maintaining key global relationships. That's not light work, that's constant pressure at the highest level. And all of this is happening at the same time. He's managing institutional issues, public expectations, and ongoing scrutiny, while still showing up and delivering on his role. The centenary message wasn't just symbolic, it showed commitment under strain, and people noticed that instantly. Now place that next to what Prince Harry has been doing during the same period, and the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. While Charles appeared at Balmoral Castle, standing firm and renewing his promise, Harry was making international appearances and giving speeches that sparked debate. One particular speech, delivered just days before a major royal engagement, drew attention for its timing and content, and not in a quiet way. Some commentators even questioned how it was put together, suggesting it felt overly polished or detached. Regardless of that, the bigger issue was perception, how these moments line up side by side. On one side, a leader reaffirming duty despite visible difficulty. On the other, public appearances that stirred fresh headlines at sensitive moments. That comparison doesn't need extra explanation. It speaks for itself, and the public reaction, it's already been measured. According to YouGov polling, there's a clear difference in approval levels between Charles and Harry. These numbers were captured at the same time, from the same audience, during the same period of events, and they highlight exactly how differently each figure is being viewed. That's not coincidence, that's response. As everything moves forward, more decisions are still waiting to be made. The story isn't frozen, it's still unfolding, and every new development adds to that growing record that doesn't erase anything, it only expands. Then there's the statue debate, and it's become a symbol of something bigger than just design. The memorial, meant to honor Queen Elizabeth II, sparked immediate reactions, and many of them were blunt. People expected something iconic, something instantly recognizable, and what they saw didn't fully deliver that feeling. Comments like, "It could be anyone," and "This doesn't capture her," started spreading quickly. And when that kind of reaction shows up across the board, it points to a deeper disconnect. Because the image people had in mind was clear. For decades, the Queen was strongly associated with horseback riding, morning routines, ceremonial events like trooping the color, and a lifelong connection that was visible to everyone. That image wasn't complicated. It was consistent, powerful, and widely understood. A mounted statue would have captured that instantly. No confusion, no second guessing. But the final decision went in a different direction. And that difference is exactly why the reaction has been so strong. It's not just about artistic taste, it's about expectation versus outcome. So now everything sits together in one place. The pledge, the public appearances, the polling numbers, the debates, the reactions. None of it stands alone anymore. The record keeps growing, and it doesn't filter or adjust itself. It simply holds everything as it is. What was said, what was shown, and how it was received, all of it stays. And as more time passes, that record only becomes clearer, sharper, and harder to reshape.